Okay, so talking about neural neural control and coordination. So what do we mean by control and coordination? So neural simply means it's done through a nervous system. And when we were studying animal kingdom, we realized, do all animals have nervous system? Iram has done that chapter. So Iram, do all animals have nervous system?
No.
No, right? So we were going through phylums. Which was the first phylum from where the nervous system or anything like a nervous system originated? Do you remember? Any idea? Cnidarians, right? The kind of, they started developing, they were the first that started developing a system, right? Anything where two different kind of tissues can work together or two different kind of organs can work together. So nervous system mediated control. Now control is for our voluntary functions and coordination is with internal organs. Okay, so nervous system also helps us to control our voluntary functions, like you want to lift your hand, you forcefully want to breathe in, but also many things are involuntary which are still controlled by the nervous system. For example, peristaltic movements for digestion. When you are sleeping, you still are breathing, and other activities, learned activities where we voluntarily do not think about those things. So we voluntarily do not control. So release of enzymes, hormones, maintenance of osmotic pressure in the blood through kidneys, all these things are done constantly, even when we are not controlling it. We are never controlling it. Beating of the heart, etc., increasing of the heart rate, decreasing of the heart rate, that we cannot do, correct? That we cannot control. So is this part clear? What are we going to achieve in this chapter in terms of learning and understanding? Now, the neural, when I talk about uh, coordination, as I said, coordination is when two or more organs inside our body interact and help each other to achieve a function. That's called coordination. And control, as I told you, it is the control of our body, both voluntary and involuntary, that happens from movement to sleeping to waking up to excreting, digesting, everything. Now, there are certain aspects of our physiology that only make sense or that can only be evolved if we have a nervous system in place. Because the nervous system, which we also in your books they call it neural system, it provides a organized mechanism or a organized way to deliver messages inside the body. Okay, and those also very fast, and those will not be diffuse messages, those will be quick messages coming from the body to the brain, which is our central seat of the nervous system, and from the brain to the body. Okay, so you can write down the nervous system, why it's helpful, or the neural system. Provides an organized message delivery system. For which makes connections between organs and tissues, which makes connections between organs and tissues for a quick coordination. For a quick coordination. Okay, Now, this kind of thing can also happen through chemicals in our body. And there is another chapter that we have to do, which is called chemical control and coordination. So anyone knows what do we call those chemicals that act as messengers in our body? Which do signaling and transfer message from one place to another through blood. What are those chemical called? Those are called hormones, correct? Now, hormones are chemical messengers, and they lead to messages sent from, also again, from the brain to a specific organ through bloodstream. That also helps us to shape our physiology or to temporally regulate certain kind of developmental patterns. Like sexual maturity was one example. When we were studying human reproductive system, I told you that there is a phase where human and many other sexually reproducing organisms, almost all sexually reproducing organisms, are in a juvenile phase, which is sexually immature phase. And then suddenly, when they reach an age, something sends a signal to the sex organs to develop and start forming gametes. And that was happening through a series of hormones, correct? Okay. Now, in this case, we will be talking about a direct network to send signals from brain to body, or body means organs and tissues. Again, and this, and so brain to body is known as motor signals. Okay, or motor neurons take these signals, and from body to brain is called sensory signals, and sensory neurons deliver this signal. So there are two different set of neurons. So obviously, most of the thing starts with sensory, because these sensory neurons are very important for us to live, exist in the environment. Because to exist in the environment, an organism has to constantly scan the environment and know what is happening outside, and whatever is happening, how I have to change my response for that. Suppose if heat temperature is increasing, the organism should know that temperature is increasing in the environment. I have to do something to protect myself from that increasing temperature or decreasing temperature, right? So there will be sensory neurons which are temperature sensitive, which will sense that change in temperature, because of which you get, when you feel cold you get goosebumps, and when you feel hot you start sweating. So these signals go to the brain, and brain mounts a response. If you feel cold, which is of higher intensity, apart from goosebumps you will also start shivering. That's your body's response. So signals go from the body to the brain through these sensory neurons. Then brain processes that information and figures out that, okay, what to do now. If it is too hot, the body should sweat so that the body surface can cool down. So there will be signals back from motor neurons. Sometimes these responses are voluntary, under our control. Sometimes they are not even under our control, and sometimes they don't even reach the brain. One example of that is your reflex action that we will cover in this chapter. So reflex action is a defense. It's a mechanism that helps us to protect ourselves from very immediate and very acute dangers. For example, if you accidentally touch a very prickly thorn or a very hot substance, before you can even think about it, that what's happening to you, you retract your hand or the leg, correct? If you step accidentally on something that pricks into your foot, you will retract your foot very fast. before your brain can even think, or before you realize that what you stepped on. Correct? Make sense? So that's a reflex. So reflex does not involve brain, because we do not think, we do not process the information. The information only goes till the spinal cord and comes back with the immediate response in the affected muscles. Okay, so there are many kind of reflexes in our body, and one kind of reflex we will study in detail, which is the knee jerk reflex. Okay, cool. So let's start with the nervous system. So what is the nervous system made up of, or the neural system made up of? So starting from the basic, the building blocks, the nervous system is composed of highly specialized cells. They are also terminally differentiated cells. So in the chapter cell division and cell cycle, we studied that there are some kind of cells that retain their capacity to divide. What were they called? These cells are always present, or these tissues are always present in plants throughout their life. That's why plants keep on growing. But in animals, the growth stops after a particular age. We reach a maximum size and then we stop growing. So what are these cells which have this capacity to continuously keep dividing called? In plants, they are called meristematic tissues. Is that correct? You remember that part, people?
Yes.
Yeah. But some tissues or some cells do not divide any further because they reach a terminal end of specialization. Okay, so they are so specialized in their work that they cannot divide further, and they will just do exactly what they have been made for, and they will do their business the best. For example, neurons are one of those. So neurons, which are the fundamental and structural unit of the nervous system, are highly specialized cells. They are elongated in shape. We will understand why. And they are terminally differentiated. By this, I mean they cannot further divide and change their fate. Once a neuron is made, a neuron is made. Another kind of terminally differentiated cells are the heart muscles. So our heart muscles also, they cannot divide, they cannot regenerate. So whatever happens to our heart, I think in the last to last chapter only we discussed that, right? So injuries in the heart, especially in humans. So humans after birth have lost the capacity to repair or regenerate their heart tissues. So cardiomyocytes are another terminally differentiated cells in humans. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now this neural system, whether it is simple or very complex, like humans have very complex neural system consisting of central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and in that peripheral also there are sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic, all these categories. But something like as you said, someone said Nidarians, right, have this something like a hydra, which is a, you all know what is a hydra? Hydra is a very simple organism which is composed of a series of neurons connected to each other. They don't have a central brain or something like that. Okay, so even in a very simple nervous system, neurons are the same. They function the same. And when we go one step ahead of hydra, then we have insects. Insects have a very very primitive kind of a brain, which is not exactly brain, but it is called a ganglia. Okay, it is a bunch of neurons that have formed together a ganglia or a neural tissue. Okay, and when you go above and above that, you go to reptiles or amphibians. From there onwards, you get proper brains. In fish also there is a proper brain. Okay, so whenever you the moment you go to vertebrates, from invertebrates, you see proper brain and the proper central nervous system. But the one thing that stays the same is neuron. So let me show you a neuron. Let me insert this image here. Can you all see this image? I've taken this from your NCERT only. Is that visible, everyone? Everyone can see this image? Yes, okay. Iram is saying we can see, so great. Let me, yes. So what do you see here? First thing you see is this is a very simplified cartoon version of a neuron. Neurons come in all different shapes and sizes, but one thing which is common is they are not very cute oval or spherical kind of cells. They are always elongated because they have two things. They have three things basically if you divide it. One is this, the other is, so 1, 2, and this long 3. These three components are there in every neuron. So the center one is called a cell body, as you can see. So because neuron is a cell, so there has to be a cell body. So this is a cell body. Okay, and what you see inside the cell body as dots, they are called Nissel's granules. Okay, they are present in the cytoplasm. They are small granules present in the cytoplasm of a neuron. And from this cell body, two things arise. One is this highly branched structure, which are multiple, not just one, and even in one there is multiple branches, as you can see. So this highly branched structure is called dendrites. A dendrite is the place from where every neuron receives input. Okay, so input comes in through dendrites. So every message is received by these dendrites into the cell. Then it goes into the cell body where it is processed. Okay, seems like the brain also has, the neuron itself also has input processing. And then from the cell body, inside the cell body, of course, there'll be a nucleus because it's a cell. And from that cell body, from this part till here is called axon. Axon is that gives the output. So whatever input was received by a neuron, let's say you sensed a difference in the temperature, so your sensory neurons detected that difference, sent a signal to your brain. So they will detect that change through these dendrites of that sensory neuron, then cell body, which is present in the spinal cord. Now let me tell you another thing, important thing. Cell bodies are either present in the spinal cord or they are present in the brain. Cell bodies are not present anywhere outside spinal cord or the brain in our body. Does that make sense, everyone? Is that clear, everyone? Does it make sense?
Yes.
So which means that in your hand, there will be no neuronal cell bodies. There will only be axons, millions of axon bundles running from your spinal cord to every end of your fingertip or your legs and toes. In fact, in your what do you say, in your organs as well, everywhere in the body where this nervous system sends signal, it's the axons that run. So these are like the cables, the wires that run throughout our body. And axons can be very long. It can be meters long, like in a giraffe or in a blue whale. You can see how big is a blue whale. And there also there is a brain, which is a central seat. and till the fin, pectoral fin, till the caudal fin of the whale to the flippers, everywhere these axons only go from their spinal cord, uh, uh, where the cell bodies reside in the spinal cord and the brain. Is that clear, everyone? So axons can be very, very long. Okay, now point is, what does not divide is this cell body. But if you cut an axon, if an axon gets cut like this, let's say, and which it actually happens multiple times during any injury or something, or axons cut, they can they can regenerate back, they can form a connection back. So these can heal, the cable or the wire can heal back. Okay, is it clear? But if once the cell body is dead, then that neuron cannot be revived back, or the cell body cannot divide and make two neurons like other cells can divide. Is this clear, everyone? I hope you are writing these points. So input through dendrites, processing in the cell body, which has the nucleus, which has many genes that get upregulated, downregulated. Then axon is the output. Now there are certain things, for example, a myelin sheath. Neurons that have this sheath, myelin sheath, and myelin sheath is made up of Schwann cells. So each, it is like a, yes, do you have a question, Aisha? Okay, so Aisha and Rawan has joined, Jani has also joined. Good evening, everyone. We are studying neural system today. Please feel free to stop me at any given point of time and ask questions if you have any doubts. Okay, very well. Okay, so what I was saying, yes, these Schwann cells, kind of, you can imagine them as insulating tapes. So on a wire, when you put a tape somewhere, that region gets insulated. So these cells kind of go around the axon and just tape it. And because they are cells, they will have a nucleus. So Schwann cells make these myelin sheaths. Now myelin sheath act as an insulator. Exactly the same kind of insulator that you study in your physics in the chapter electricity, where insulators cannot conduct electricity or current, and current is simply what? Okay, how do you define current? How do you define current in physics? An electric current, how do you define that in physics? What is the simple definition of an electric current? Flow of charges, correct? We define it like that. Yes, no, something? Okay, no one wants to speak, it seems. Anyways, so if you cannot speak, you can write in the chat, people, but please keep it alive, keep the class alive. Okay, so myelin sheath acts as an insulator. I will tell you why and how it is important, what it does. Schwann cells are responsible for forming these myelin sheath, and there are places where the myelin sheath is not present, or two myelin sheaths make, and there is some region where they are absent, the regions which I am highlighting here with this blue marks. So they are called nodes of Ranvier. So nodes of Ranvier are where this myelin sheath is absent. Okay, just write down myelin sheaths absent. Okay, so this is the axon overall. This axon can be very long, and towards the end, remember, what is the axon doing? It is sending a signal out. Now, where can the signal go? From one neuron, where are you sending the signal? You can either send the signal to another neuron, which is in the series, the next neuron, or you can send it to organs, the muscles, right? The muscles of the organ, correct? Suppose it is your voluntary muscles of the hand which you want to contract. So when you lift a pen or when you raise your hand, you are making your muscles move. So how can you do that? Because you want to make your muscles move. So these motor neurons coming from your brain, you actually are deciding to move that muscle in your brain. Okay. So the moment you decide to move your hand or lift your hand in your brain, the signal to these muscles so that they can work comes from the brain through motor neurons, and you can lift your hand. Have you seen a baby walking? A newborn baby, an infant, like a 1 year or a 2 year old baby. How do they walk? They walk as if they are drunk, right? Their movements are not at all coordinated. It seems like they cannot control their own hands and feet. Yes or no? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually true, because when we are born, our motor neurons are not very well synapsed with our muscles. So neurons coming from the brain, because we do not have a practice. So these neurons, these connections between neurons and other neurons and neurons and other muscles gets strengthened with time, experience, and practice. So the more we will walk, the better we will become walking in. The same thing happens for precision things like making a craft, riding a bicycle. We have to train our brain and our muscles to do that. So there are different kind of movements. So this voluntary movement of muscles also require a lot of a lot of coordination between our brain and the muscles. Okay, and that coordination comes with time. So when babies starts to walk, they take their first steps. They cannot do it in a very you know um, coordinated manner. The same thing you will also feel if any one of you unfortunately had gone through a fracture, and when you get that cast and you do not use that hand for a very long time, for weeks or month, then after that, when the cast is removed, you feel that for the first few days, your coordination with that hand, even if it is your natural hand, it's not that great. Correct? Yes or no? And we all can do this experiment ourselves. We all have a natural hand, most of us. Some people are ambidextrous and they can write equally well with both the hands, or they can eat equally well with both the hands. But we most of us have a natural hand with which we can write. With the other hand, if you try to write the same, you will not be able to coordinate. You will not be able to make A, B, or C, or 1 or 2 properly, right? Because you trained one of your hand. So the synapses of these motor neurons, which form a connection between your brain and your hand and allow you to do all these precision activities, are more stronger in one hand versus the other. That's how your one hand is better, and it's trained over time, and you can do more precise activities or finer movements with that. So that happens because this output from axon can go to the next neuron or any other muscle which has to show a response. And that happens to this synaptic knob. So where the axon ends is called axon terminal. Terminal means end. Okay. So it terminates here. And at the end of a axon terminal, you form these synaptic knobs. So these knobs went on to form synapses. Okay. They form synapses. And by synapses, I simply mean junction. Junction between two neurons, or junction between a neuron and a muscle. Is that clear, everyone? Both will be called synapses. If it is a synapse between two neurons, it's simply called a synapse, or neuron synapse, or it is called interneuronal junction. But if it is between a neuron and a muscle, it is called neuromuscular synapse or neuromuscular junction. Is that clear?
Yes. So,
Yes.
so how many neurons does the brain contain?
Yes, that's so no one can count the number of neurons which are present in a human brain, but the estimate, and again the estimate is done by brain autopsies from dead people. So an average human, so what we can do is we can take a small slice or a small volume of the brain and look for the neuronal density in that region, like 1 millimeter of a sample or something. So it turns out to be that our brain contains more than 80 billion neurons. Okay, that is an estimated figure. In different books you will find different figures. It goes up till 100 billion neurons in some books, but the most reliable figures is around, we have around 80 billion neurons in our in an average sized human brain. Okay,
Yeah.
it's in the brain, and we have excluded the spinal cord. So some books you will find including your it goes to 80 to 88 billion neurons. So some books take the middle figure, which is 86 billion neurons. Okay, so earlier it was thought to be containing 100 billion neurons, 100 billion to 110 billion neurons, but that's not, it's a little scaled up, and we have around 86 billion neurons. Now the billion is also a very big number, you know, if you just can, just to give you a context, you know how in duration, if I talk about 1 million seconds, what is it in terms of days or weeks? Anyone has any idea? I'm just giving you a context of how big billion is from a million. Anyone knows how much is 1 million seconds equal to? It is somewhere equal to 11 days. Okay, 1 million seconds is approximately 11 days. Now, would you like to guess how much will 1 billion seconds is? Just a guess. Make a guess. Take a guess. How, if 1 million seconds is 11 days, how big will be 1 billion seconds? 11 months, 11 weeks, 1 year, something? Any guesses? No guesses? Not even in the chat? Okay, not interested. No one is interested. Okay, so just to put you in context, this is around more than 31 years. So this is how big 1 billion is compared to 1 million. So that is the scale we are talking about. So if 1 million seconds is 11 days, 1 billion seconds will be 31 years approximately. More than 31 years actually. Okay, but less than 32, so I'm taking 31. So when I take 86 billion neurons, you know, there'll be a lot of zeros behind it. So let's keep this figure for our purpose, and let's remove the others. Now, all these neurons, and every neuron, it's not like one neuron will form only one synapse. One neuron can form up to 1,000 to 3,000 synapses also in the brain. Okay, so the synapses are formed here. So this will form one synapse, another, 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 another. So this neuron in this cartoon shows you an axon terminal that is capable of forming 6 synapses with 6 other kind of neurons. And here also one neuron can receive input from as many neurons it wants. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, here 6, 7, 8, 9. So it can receive inputs from thousands, hundreds of neurons, and it can send input to another hundreds and thousands of neurons simultaneously. So that's the scale of complexity we are talking about, but we will not deal with it in this chapter because we have to keep it fundamental so that you first understand how it is built. Okay, Okay, so these are different parts of the neurons. Anyone has any confusion in any part of the neuron? Yes, no?
So,
Yes.
what does Nissl granules do?
Yeah, so it is granular bodies in, actually these kind of granules are not only present in just the neurons, they are also present in, remember I told you white blood cells are also of two types, granular and agranular, correct? These are
Yeah.
granular proteins. So they are present in the cytoplasm. When you stain these proteins, you can very easily see the cytoplasm and say that, okay, this is the cell body. Whereas the other places where they are not present will not be the cell body. It might be the dendrite or the axon or something else. So these are just granular protein bodies which are present in neurons and can be easily stained to visualize. Okay, they can do what to say, they can do a lot of different functions in the cell body, and they are also present in the dendrites. So if there is a cell body from where two things are arising, okay, and both looks, so every time it's not like as clear as you see in this picture. Sometimes this is the dendrite and this is the axon, and this is a bipolar neuron because it has two poles, one going here and one going here. And then these dendrites later on bifurcate, and these axons also later on bifurcate to make synapses. Now, how will you know which is dendrite and which is axon? Because dendrites will have these Nissl granules. Okay, but axons don't have Nissl granules. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you can just write down dendrites contains these Nissl granules, and dendrites are responsible for receiving the input or impulses and send it to the cell body. Okay. Now, about neurons, neurons can be of three types, like I already told you here. So one is, first is multipolar. Majority of neurons are multipolar in our brain and in the spinal cord as well. So multipolar means the word multi and polar, many poles. Okay, so it has one axon and more dendrites, like two or more than 2 or 3, 4, 10 dendrites. That's called multipolar neuron. So that one axon will not just give rise to one synapse. Of course, axon will differentiate and give rise to many synapses, but they will also have multiple. So this traditional neuron that is shown here, this cartoon, is like a multipolar neuron. You can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4 different clusters of dendrites, more than one clusters of dendrites, but one axon going, and then of course it bifurcates into axon synaptic knobs, which are multiple. But write down multipolar is one axon and more than two dendritic clusters. Okay, and these kind of multipolar neurons are majorly found in our cortex, cerebral cortex of the brain. I will teach you about different areas of the brain, but just write down for now cerebral cortex. Okay, cortex is the biggest part of our brain. So humans have very big brains as compared to other organisms, or what I was saying. What did I say the last? Sorry, I just forgot.
Humans have big
Yes,
brain.
humans have very big brains, and these this bigger size of brain is because of this cortex, which is, so if you touch anywhere on your head, you are touching the cortex only. Okay, all other regions like the midbrain, cerebellum, they are they are towards the inside of the brain, but this cortical region is the biggest region that we have in humans. Other primates, have smaller cortex, and hence their brain is smaller than humans. Okay, so multipolar is present in cerebral cortex. Then we have bipolar neurons, as the word says, bipole. So bipolar neurons, it has one major axon and one dendrite. Now the dendrite can go on to give rise to two, but it will be one single dendrite going. So just the one that I drew few moments ago. So bipolar neurons have one axon and one dendritic branch. And these kind of bipolar neurons are present in regions or in organs where you have to receive and send signal. That's all. So one direction of receiving and one direction of sending. Can you think of any place in or outside our brain or connected to the brain where we have to do this? Eyes are one such organ, right? Eyes just receive visual stimulus and send it to the brain. So we have optic nerve. Remember optic nerve coming from the retina? So the neurons in the retina are bipolar neurons. Is that clear? Retina of the eye. And then the third is unipolar. So you will think that unipolar neurons will not have dendrites, right? But if they won't have dendrites, they will not form synapses. They will not get any input. Make sense or not? So it's not like they don't have it, but it's not as developed. So when you look at these neurons, you will see that it will look like a cell body and a long axon will be coming out of it. So you will see that it does not have a dendrite. Okay, so it is a cell body with one axon. Okay, and it is usually found in the embryonic stage of development where our brain has not consolidated and formed synapses with each other. Even when a newborn even in a newborn baby's brain, many of the neurons have not formed proper synapses. That's why the baby cannot learn languages, cannot learn to walk or lift hand properly, cannot learn to chew, or does not know what other things, anything. Like the baby learns over time. So they say that it's very important, the first few years of development is very important for the proper development of the brain. Correct? Right?
Yeah.
Because these brain synapses are getting strengthened over time and forming more and more connections. So it's very interesting, because if you look at brain, imagine, this is how I understand about the synapses and strengthening of synapses. Think of brain as a forest, and to walk through the forest we take some routes, right? So the most used routes where you walk, the most traveled ones, you see that there are no grasses on those routes, correct? The ones which are more traveled get strengthened. You can see those roots going through the grasses. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There is a forest patch with one tree here, one tree here, one tree here, and people always took this route. So you will see that over time the grasses will be thinner, and you will see that this route will be very much visible. If some people due to some problem here, this tree fell, and then they start taking this route now, you will see that this route will start getting strengthened then, correct? So this is exactly how our brain behaves. So the neurons which fire together or work together, they wire together. So the more used neurons gets more strengthened in the brain. Okay, that is how we learn different skills and develop different capabilities. Anyway, so multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar present in retina, forebrain, and mostly in the embryonic stages are the examples. Now, myelinated and non-myelinated. So there are these axons. It's not like all the axons have myelin sheath. Okay. In fact, most of the neurons do not have myelin sheath. Okay. So unmyelinated neurons do not, they are called unmyelinated because they do not have a myelin sheath. And you will find unmyelinated neurons mostly in the autonomous or somatic neural systems. We will study about them in detail later on. But just know that spinal nerve fibers are found in myelinated nerve fibers are found in your spine, okay, and your cranial nerves. Okay, so myelinated is that contains myelin sheath. They are mostly found in your spine, which is your, what do we call it, spinal cord, and cranial nerves. Cranial nerves come from the word cranium. Cranium is the head. So many nerves go in our brain from our neck region and the face region and come out also. So our brain is kept, it's not like it's freely floating in our head. So there is a plate on which the brain sits. Okay. And this is the plate in the skull. This is the skull. So on this plate, there are some perforations or holes through which exactly 11 pair, which means 22 cranial nerves enter inside the brain and come out of the brain. So these cranial nerves, which are 11 pair in human, they are myelinated along with the spinal cord neurons. They are myelinated. Most of the neurons inside the brain are unmyelinated. Is that clear? Iram, Chania, and others, is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, so next thing which I would like to talk about is how do these neurons interact with each other. So one neuron, how does it sends signal to another neuron? Okay, so basically we will learn about the synapse itself. So what is a synapse? Let me put another figure here to explain it to you better. Can see this. Yes, this is a good image. Can you see this image, everyone? Yes, can you see this image? Is it loading for you or is it there?
It's there.
It's there. Okay, great. So this is where what you are seeing here is this part of the neuron. Okay, this axon terminal, it's coming. So this is the axon terminal, which they have mentioned it here. So this is the axon and this is the axon terminal. And this terminal here is forming this synaptic knob. So this whole thing is a synaptic knob shown in greater detail. Now, as you can see, this synaptic knob, so this neuron will be called presynaptic neuron. This is a term which you won't use in your NCRT or like probably in entrances it can be asked. And if I say that this thing here is another neuron, so it can be a neuron or also can be a muscle. If it is a muscle, then this becomes a neuromuscular junction or a neuromuscular synapse. But if it is another neuron, it is called postsynaptic neuron. So they have written here presynaptic membrane coming from the presynaptic neuron here, and postsynaptic membrane coming from this postsynaptic neuron here. And in between, there is an empty space, which is called synaptic cleft. Okay. So now you know that two neurons which make connection together, they do not physically touch each other. So this kind of synapse is called a chemical synapse. There is another type of synapse which is called electrical synapse, where two neurons, so the axon ending of one neuron is in physical contact. There is no synaptic cleft there. Is in physical contact. The membrane is in physical contact with the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron. There, it's called a tight junction, or tight synapse, or an electrical synapse. These electrical synapses are very few in the system. Most of the synapses are chemical synapses. Electrical synapses are very, very few and rare. So I don't think that you have to study electrical synapses in your syllabus, but just know that electrical synapses exist. Okay. Now let's focus on chemical synapse. So you can write down electrical synapses are rare and chemical synapses are frequent or present in our system.
So,
Yes.
so in electrical synapse, myelin sheaths won't be present, right? Because it's an insulator, right?
No, but it is not present at the synapse. No, myelin sheath, what it does, we will talk about it later. So myelin sheath is only present in the axon. So from where axon terminal starts, there is no myelin sheath, and that is an insulator. It does not mean that in axons which have myelin sheath, the conductance or the current cannot pass from, does pass.
So your voice
The
is
myelin sheath
breaking.
actually, just 1 second, let it stabilize. Is my voice stable now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying that this insulator does not prevent the transmission. Transmission happens, and in fact, transmission happens faster in myelinated axons than unmyelinated axons. Okay. So electrical synapses still can have. They are themselves very rare, and most of the times they are not myelinated. Most of the neurons in general are not myelinated in the brain. So I told you only myelinated neurons are present in spinal cord and cranial nerves, most of them. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first let's understand this synapse. Where are we? Yes. Okay. So this is a chemical synapse because it has a synaptic cleft, and we call it chemical synapse because neurons communicate with each other with these chemical molecules known as neurotransmitters. Neuro means neuron, transmitters means they transmit the information. So electrical signal can only reach till here, till this place, which is the axon terminal. After that axon terminal, these synaptic vesicles have to be formed, and these synaptic vesicles contain what is known as neurotransmitters. So what do these synaptic vesicles mature, become big, then they go to the membrane, dock to the membrane. This is exactly how it happens. I'm explaining. So in physicality, it exactly happens. These synaptic vesicles are formed. They go to the presynaptic membrane. They dock with the presynaptic membrane, fuse with the presynaptic membrane, and open on the other side and release all these neurotransmitter chemicals inside the synaptic cleft. Now, if these chemicals are released in the synaptic cleft and they act as a messenger, there must be something on the postsynaptic membrane to read the message, right? It's like passing on the baton. So someone has to, something got delivered to your doorstep as a letter, someone has to receive that letter to know the message, correct? Makes sense or not? So on the postsynaptic membrane, we have something called receptors. Now these receptors are very specific for every neurotransmitter. So there are different types of neurotransmitters that act. Some neurotransmitters are excitatory, or they give exciting signals, like they make the neurons fire more. Some are inhibitory neurotransmitters, which make the neuron less receptive. Okay, so sometimes in our body, only at the extreme ends, like in the brain where the processing is happening, and at the periphery from where we are sensing the environment, the messages are generated. Rest, the neurons do not know the nature of the message. For example, let me give you an example. So if you have a touch receptor in your hand, so the moment something you will touch something or something will touch you, these neurons, the first neuron, the first sensory neuron which is present in your finger, the axon of that neuron will sense the touch, but that mechanical input, which is the touch is a mechanical force driven input, correct? It will convert it into electrical signal, and that electrical signal will move all the way from your hand into your spinal cord. There will be a synapse with another neuron, and there the signal will be converted in the form of a chemical signal. So till this point you have electrical signal which gets converted at the synapse into chemical signal, and from there onwards the second neuron does not even know what the signal was for. Was it a touch signal? Was it a light signal? Was it a smell signal? Was it a taste signal? Was it a pain signal? The nature of that signal is not known by the second, third, fourth, whatever neuron is there afterwards. They just know. It's just like someone gave me a signal in my, like this, they told me something, and that signal was to like reach, or reach the last person in a chain. So they whispered in my ear that touch the next person. So I touched the next person. So the next person just got a touch signal. The next person does not know what the signal was, and I just did a expression signal, like through my expressions I just told in a sign language that touch the next person. So that person will go and touch the next person and do the same thing. So what the actual signal was, only the first neuron knows. You understand? Was it a touch, a smell, a taste, a pain, a stress, a pressure, whatever, temperature change? Rest all the neurons just can take it as an electrical signal, change in the potential difference of ions. And somehow, magically, and the nature of this is still not very well understood. We understand a lot of it, but not all of it. That's true with every science field. When that signal reaches a specific region in the brain, we perceive it, whatever was happening, we perceive it the same like the first neuron perceives. So the message gets decoded. So the message gets encrypted, like first neuron encrypts it as a chemical, then it's a chemical, electrical, chemical, electrical, chemical, electrical, reaches the brain where it gets decoded, and oh, temperature changed. So in between, neurons do not know whether the temperature changed or not. They don't have any information for that. It's just flow of ions happening through that neuron. So isn't it amazing, a system? Correct? Yes, no, something? Okay, so these neurotransmitters can be various different kinds. For example, the most common are glutamate, which is a excitatory one, acetylcholine. These are all names that you will hear, and these two. And then there are serotonin. Serotonin also acts as a neurotransmitter. And then there is what else? What can act as a neurotransmitter? Dopamine. All these can act as a neurotransmitter. So all these chemicals are different neurotransmitters. They have different functions. Some excite, some inhibit the neuron. And for all these, there will be receptors. So for dopamine, there will be dopaminergic receptors here that will bind to the dopamine chemical, and whatever, if it is excitatory, it will, the next neuron will also get excited, and this chemical signal again inside the cell of the postsynaptic neuron will be converted into a electrical signal. Okay, so electrical signal gets converted into chemical signal in the synapse, then reaches the postsynaptic membrane, goes into the cell body of the postsynaptic membrane, and again gets converted into electrical signal, again moves through the axon of the second postsynaptic neuron, reaches the end, again gets converted into chemical signal, and so forth, so on. So one thing that you must have realized is that it's too much of work for chemical synapse, right? Electrical synapses are simple. They are so tightly junctioned to each other that whatever is the signal will just keep moving as electrical impulse from one neuron to another. Correct? Do you understand, everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now my question is, if it's so simple with electrical synapses, why we don't have more electrical synapses in our brain? Why do we have chemical synapses? And one thing which is true is chemical synapses are slower than electrical synapses. So why we don't have faster signal sending mechanism, and why in evolution we chose to stick with chemical synapses, which is slower? Anyone who will give me this answer will be rewarded an extra point in the upcoming test. Because that's something if you understood. What happens, so these synapses, chemical synapses, are like checkpoints. It's like in a city, we have expressways. So think of electrical synapses as expressways. At the same speed, the vehicle is just cruising from one city to another. You can travel very long distance in a very short time, zoom at a high speed. But these are like checkpoints where police will, they're checking every vehicle, and you stop for some time, the traffic got slower, then it takes speed, then again stops at another checkpoint. So what is the benefit? Whenever you are confused in biology, look for an analog in the real life. That's how biology works. It's just logic. What is the benefit with checkpoints? So should cities have checkpoints or not? Okay, just answer me. What do checkpoints do? Is there any benefit of checkpoint, or are they non-beneficial things but still in place? No one interested? Okay, so checkpoints are important because they help us to modulate the signal. Okay, sometimes what signals we are getting, we need to amplify it. Sometimes we need to dampen that signal. Okay, for example, if we just had electrical synapses, whatever is the intensity of signal coming from the environment, that intensity could not have been modulated, because as a current it will just flow from one wire to another. But since you have a chemical change of this electrical signal, a neuron can decide at this point that what to do with the signal. Should I send the next cell the same amount of signal? By modulating the amount of neurotransmitters released. It also gives a handle to the postsynaptic neuron to decide what intensity to receive. So the presynaptic neuron can decrease or increase the signal by decreasing or increasing the number of neurotransmitters or vesicles. The postsynaptic neuron can also increase or decrease the signal by decreasing or increasing the number of receptors on its membrane. So we have this advantage of modulation of signal, and that's very, very important for us to survive in nature. And this is the reason why you can wear clothes, because we never feel our clothes. Imagine feeling your clothes all the time when you are wearing it. So when someone touches it, we feel it, right? Imagine someone constantly touching you all the time, everywhere. Will you be able to focus on anything? No, right? Sometimes it happens that there is something which is stuck in your clothes somewhere and constantly keep irritating you. So unless and until you get that thing out, or sometimes in sweaters or shirts, if you have tags at the collar, it irritates you, right? Because that is an extra thing which is touching you, which is not, you are not habituated to. So this sense of habituation, where we are okay wearing clothes are constantly touching and giving a signal to our touch receptors, but still we are not, we just decide to, modulate that signal and not constantly um, feel it. Same thing happens with smell. So let's say you move to a place which had a very peculiar smell which you did not like. For example, you are living near a fish market, so you will have a foul smell. But if you keep living there for months, after a few months, you will get habituated. You will not feel that smell irritating always, because to survive in that condition, our brain adapts or habituates to that sense. So that same thing will not keep irritating us or will not keep sending signals to our brain, and we can focus on other things. Is that clear, everyone? This is the same reason because of which we never feel our body odor. So every human has a body odor which other humans can feel around, but we cannot feel our body odor because we are habituated to it. Those do not send a signal to our olfactory or our smell neurons anymore. We have decided to. So this is very important. Okay, do you understand this, people?
Yes.
Yes, great. On the other hand, it also helps us to be more sensitive to certain things. If something is harmful to us, we get sensitization. So we don't, let's say, if I eat a certain kind of food, then I get a stomach upset or a toxicity. So next time my neurons will be more sensitive, like the taste receptors and also the smell receptors will make me feel aversive from that food. Don't eat it. It's a signal. I'm more sensitive to even the smell of that food because it's not good for me. So sensitization and habituation both happens through this modulation at the synapse. Is that clear, everyone? Okay, now quickly coming to brain. So this is neuron, this is synapse. I will first make you familiar with all the structures that we are going to study. So next thing is the central nervous system, the part which is brain. Now about brain, we have to discuss a lot of things, but let's first talk about just the structural anatomy, structure or anatomy. So are you familiar with brain, human brain? A little bit? You are, right? Everyone is familiar with brain?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you have the image of brain in your NCERT. I'm using some images today to explain things. So this is how a human brain, it's a sagittal section. Sagittal means from the side. If you cut the brain into two, this is a sagittal section. So this part, which I will be marking with blue, that you see, all of this that I have highlighted in the blue. Okay, this is called